Harry's Wife, part 101.99, Behind the Scenes. Pure nasty. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. As I've explained to you, some narcissists don't operate facades. Basically, they keep the unpleasant side of them in check during the Bronze period, but they don't hold themselves out as being intrinsically kind and sympathetic and empathic individuals. And soon enough, you see the bombastic behaviours, the unpleasant catcalling, the fighting, the rowing with neighbours, the whole smorgasbord of devaluing behaviours. Other narcissists, which at first are much harder to spot, the mid-range and the greater, operate those facades. With the greater, it's that charming facade of knowing the way that people think and behave and tapping into what they want, being very popular, being magnetic and charismatic and appearing to care, albeit not having to shout about it in the way that a mid-ranger would do so. These powerful individuals invariably, of course, engage in behaviours which would attract criticism. But often nothing is done about it, because those who are on the receiving end know better than to call out about it, knowing what the greater is perfectly capable of, and, of course, so many people invariably support and worship that greater individual. They also, of course, the greater have considerable access to resources which would enable them to stymie any attempt to speak out about them. Mid-rangers, of course, operate facades. Upper mid-range more in relation to a facade of superiority, with lower mid-rangers essentially being decent people, but a bit of a rough diamond, and of course the more sickening facades of the middle mid-rangers, A and B, of being decent people who are just misunderstood, that they just want to help, that they truly are kind and empathic. Of course, cracks emerge in the facade from time to time, and of course, there's invariably one or two victims who don't get to experience the facade towards them. They have the veneer of respectability and kindness during the golden period, but then that melts away for the sustained devaluation. And those that see behind the facade are invariably those behind closed doors, the long-suffering spouse, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, perhaps a family member, sometimes even a colleague or a friend. It is behind closed doors, of course, when the public aren't watching, when my people are not there, that the narcissist behaviour becomes more prevalent. Some still manage to keep it in place, even away from their public appearances, treating staff in a decent manner, being polite with the press and so forth, but there are others who struggle with it. And those repeated fractures and cracks in the facade appear demonstrative of their mid-range narcissism, where the need for control clashes with the presence of the facade, and the need for control wins out, resulting in some form of devaluing behaviour. With Harry's wife, I've explained to you that by virtue of her being a narcissist, Prince Harry will be in a sustained devaluation. We've seen aspects of that in public, the way that she controls him with the grip of doom, the occasional death stare that she's given people, the way that she moves him with her hand on the back, the way that she speaks for him, and also the fact that she's there with her rictus grin while more recently he looks downtrodden, stressed and anxious. But there's also been repeated comment about Harry's wife's behaviour behind the scenes. Of course, the behaviour towards Princess Charlotte, the behaviour towards Catherine, Princess of Wales, the behaviour towards people who were at her agency and on the shoots, as were uncovered by Tom Bower in his book Revenge, when he spoke about what happened at the Reitman shoots, for example. And more recently, Valentine Lowe's publication, which has brought forward more information about the bullying that Harry's wife was accused of. Notably, this has happened time and time again, which demonstrates her mid-range status, whereby where there is a threat to control, away from the public eye, the facade falls away, and she's not even able to treat people decently, because her narcissism deems she doesn't have to. Why? Because she's a duchess and they should do what she wants. And therefore, if they don't, the malign behaviours come forward. Yet, whilst we've had this information from Valentine Lowe's book, there's more information that has come forward in respect of Harry's wife's behind-the-scenes behaviour. It again comes from Reddit, and therefore you need to take that into account, along with the fact that the thread is called St. Harry's Wife, when determining the veracity of this material. But it has some legitimacy as a consequence of there are these repeated bullying allegations and other anecdotes about her behaviour. And it's not that all of these people have got together and said, okay, let's bring her down and we'll all make this up. That just wouldn't happen. These are coming from people who don't know one another. Yes, some of them work together behind the scenes, but others have not. The manicurist on the Reitman's shoot knows nothing of the staffers at Buckingham Palace. Princess Charlotte, and the way that she was bullied, she doesn't know the individuals that have seen the way that she behaved at Uvalde and so on and so forth. And so much material is coming forward from so many people, it starts to create a legitimacy with regard to the believability of what they're stating. Now, in this thread, the post states, "Not sure if this has been posted before, and I have a lot more if anyone wants to for, with, or knew Harry's wife. My friend works at AH and was on staff with Smegs and has been, were on tour in Australia. They slept in separate rooms and fought almost the entire time. Most of the fighting was about her pregnancy. If this is accurate, the fact that they sleep in separate rooms may well be a silent treatment by her to assert control over by him, rather than him necessarily escaping her. He would probably wanting to try and sort things out, and a mid-range narcissist will invariably do that, impose a silent treatment by going sleeping in another room. Of course, mid-rangers also can use heated fury, and Harry, having strong narcissistic traits, will be argumentative and angry at times, as a consequence of the diminution of his emotional empathy for his wife as being abused. And therefore it's not a surprise at all that there would be fighting between a narcissist and the intimate partner primary source who's in devaluation. The next one states, she had a falling out with Lady Cosgrove due to wanting the entire house to herself, not just a wing. This is something that has been mentioned numerous times before. If accurate, this demonstrates a sense of entitlement, a lack of emotional empathy, poor boundary recognition. She and JM decided this tour was going to be more of a holiday rock star tour, not a work tour. I think by JM, that's Jessica Mulrooney. Again, that is corroborated by comments made, I think, in Tom Bower's publication, and demonstrates her lack of accountability for performing the royal role and her narcissism driving it to make it about her. She was only nice to the good-looking or pretty staff. Everyone else was walking on eggshells and spoke down to them. Haughty behaviours, dismissiveness. Then ended up delegating the jobs involving Smegs, the ones she liked. Lady Cosgrove tried to have a word to her about how to treat staff. Smegs told her, "Fuck off, don't you know who I am?" Again, if that's accurate, haughty behaviours, verbal insult. Harry was embarrassed about her behaviour. He does have emotional empathy, and he would be embarrassed if this is all accurate. The person adds, "It's not a lot, but it's all I could get. I'm having drinks with my friend and her workmates next week, so hoping to get a bit more once a few round of drinks have occurred." Again, somebody makes reference to a Newsweek article where Harry's wife described as meanest person I've ever met over the difficult ad shoot. This references Reitman's. Hooverbull states, "This alone gives enough credence to be sceptical of her bullshit, LOL. Even on most of our worst days, at our absolute bitchiest, we would still never be called the meanest person I've ever met. That takes a very specific kind of cruelty that goes far beyond a little moodiness here or there. I've no doubt that she revels in abusing others." SDKL 1986, I thoroughly enjoyed all of these. Difficult Heron replies, "Thank you. I did multiple posts on this and was in constant contact with a couple of reporters. I spent hours talking to some of the people involved and trying to get their stories out without them having to be identified." Chico, yeah, didn't Jessica get cancelled over a racist issue with an influencer in Canada? It was in the middle of the Associated News lawsuit, and Harry's wife could not ditch her like she ditched Chrissy Teigen. Jessica Mulrooney would always post stories of how they were still besties. When the lawsuit was over, Jessica Mulrooney never posted anything ever again. Certainly then she was ghosted by Harry's wife, it would appear. Mulrooney placed upon the shelf as she's no longer serving a significance abject. If she ever threw hot tea at me, her head would be wrapped in the pot before it was all over. People need to stick up for themselves. One more Sauve Blanc. This makes me think of something I read a long time ago on here. Someone from the industry was convinced Harry's wife pretended to be her own agent, Rachel from Hotmail, and sent a psychotic ranting email to someone when it was blatantly obvious in fact was Harry's wife. This was pre-Harry. Nobody has evidence of most of this, of course, but how can there be all this smoke and no fire? Entire Truth responds, I remember that. It was for a magazine photo shoot, I think, and she was demanding all kinds of stuff and was dropped or something like that. Her and her agent had the same IPN number. Now, again, that's an allegation. Is it accurate? Well, it would not be beyond the possibilities of a narcissist pretend to be somebody else. After all, that's what narcissists do on a daily basis because of the chameleon nature. But to actively pose as somebody else for the purposes of asserting control over them is entirely possible. Why teach? She reminds me a lot of Donald Trump, actually. Same tendency to invent things to make self look good. Same tendency to pretend to be other people. Narcissists all. And as a consequence, more and more comments all about this. Somebody commenting, never underestimate a love-bombing narc with a damaged victim. That's in response to somebody asking, for the life of me, I don't understand what Harry gets from the marriage or why he'd possibly be attracted to her. She's repulsive. Somebody else adds, Harry was desperate to get married and have a family. Biggest mistake of his life is marrying Harry's wife. Why teach at this point? He may just feel trapped. Before that, she may have coddled him and encouraged him to express anger and articulate his fears and resentments. As I've explained before, she love-bombed him, giving him plenty of spicy poontang, flattering him, pretending to understand him, sympathising with what he's been through, all fake emotional empathy, whereby he is completely hoodwinked into believing that he's found something special. But this appears to demonstrate that there are further concerns about the behaviour that went on behind the scenes, which of course is all commensurate with the way that a mid-range narcissist would behave. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.